Hello and welcome. Our scheduled show with American journalist Carl Bernstein about his new book on Hillary Clinton has had to be postponed, but we promise to reschedule that as soon as possible. In the meantime, here's an interview I recently conducted on the fascinating history of the coveted Nobel Prizes. I had the chance to speak with Michael Sohlman, the executive director of the Nobel Foundation. That organization, which oversees the world-famous awards for achievements, has been going from strength to strength as the brand created by its founder Alfred Nobel more than 100 years ago is in growing demand worldwide. Over the past few years, Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates has played host to a festival of thinkers featuring dozens of Nobel laureates. Last month it was host to an exhibition about the Nobel Foundation's work and the very special people it has honored since 1901. But the history of the Nobel Prize has not always been a smooth one. I began our conversation by asking Michael Sohlman about the biggest changes taking place within the Nobel Foundation these days.
Well, I don't think it has changed as such, because the machinery which produces, quote unquote, supplies the world with Nobel laureates is a very well established procedure, already started almost 100 years ago, well, over 100 years ago. And so that hasn't changed. What has changed, of course, is the technology, which makes it possible for us to sit here and talk and hope that our words are spread to a wide audience. And this has been reinforced, of course, not only through TV, the outreach, but through the web, the World Wide Web, where our website, nobelprize.org, is visited by over 100,000 people per day. So the information, the depth and volume of information available to the interested public about the Nobel laureates, what they have done, their lectures, their autobiographies, highly interesting, are easily available, and that of course reinforces the standing of, as you put it, the brand.
Well, now of course 2001 was the centenary of the
Yes.
prizes being given out, and I wonder where you see it going. I mean, of course it covers certain areas, you know, sciences and economics.
It's physics, chemistry, physiology,
Right.
medicine, literature and peace, and then you have the economics prize in memory of Alfred Nobel, which is a new invention from 1968, but it's a kind of additional prize. But those are the prizes.
Would you, I mean, considering how the world is changing and new fields are coming in, new areas, could you see the prizes being increased to different fields?
No. Actually, we have been approached on that issue as we added the economics prize, but the board has taken the decision that's it. And actually, the then senator and later Vice President Gore approached us with a proposal of instituting an environmental Nobel Prize. And we were very flattered, but declined, of course, thinking, why not a Gore Prize? And now he is a Nobel Peace Laureate. So I think the end is good.
Now, it's interesting. I think very few people know about some of the interesting challenges that the Nobel institution has faced over the years. Two in particular cases where it nearly went completely downhill. First, the outrage initially back more than 100 years ago when the prizes were set up. There was the outrage over the institution being set up and these prizes being set up, considering the history of the founder. And the second time was with bad investments and Swedish tax laws. Ironically, the first time round, it was your great-grandfather, Range, I think it is, Range Sohlman, who was involved in saving the concept of prizes.
Well, it's nice you point to that history. I would have inhibitions of talking about my grandfather, but he was assistant to Alfred Nobel, and a very young one, hired by cable actually, and worked for him in 3 years, and obviously instilled such confidence with Nobel. So he wrote him in as his main executor of his last will, without telling him. So he was quite shocked. Now the problem was that Sweden was a very parochial, provincial country at that time, and poor, and people thought this was unpatriotic to give prizes to foreigners, because the gist of his message in the will is this cosmopolitan phrase where he says that it's his express wish that no consideration whatsoever should be given to nationality. That created the first truly international prize in the area of intellectual endeavor and creativity.
And ironically, it's so different from the Sweden of today, which is so international and accepting.
Yes, and very proud of the Nobel Prize. Actually, we have this calendar with official flag days. Well, the national flag should be raised, and on the 10th of December, it's a flag day.
It's the anniversary of Alfred Nobel's death as well.
Yes,
So
when the ceremony it takes.
Now, but just to go back, your grandfather actually to the point where he had, I hear, an armed revolver helping to secure some of the.
Well, yes, the relatives of many of the relatives, not all, of Alfred Nobel, he had no children himself. They had other ideas what to do with the money than to found a prize.
It was a lot as well at that time.
Yes, yeah. And a lot of that was in Paris actually. So he had to act swiftly because they started a legal procedure, and if we had landed in, or they had landed in French courts, the proceedings would have been going on as of today, and so he swiftly took all the documents for the stocks actually in bags and transported them in open fiacre in Paris. And as he was afraid of being robbed, so he had guns. He was armed with guns, and delivered them to the Gare du Nord, where Rothschilds were the only ones who could guarantee a safe transport to Scotland, where they were deposited and were safe, as it were. No, it's quite dramatic. But then gradually, well, also the prize awarding institutions were quite reluctant to take upon them this very heavy task, of course. The ones who immediately saw the potential of this were the seasoned politicians in Oslo, then Christiania, because Sweden and Norway were part of the same union. Mm-hmm. And they saw the potential of the Peace Prize, and they accepted the task. And then the others followed suit, and it all ended with the Prime Minister actually being the president of the board. Nowadays we're completely free of any influence from any outside part. The government is not presented, is not appointing any on the board. So it's a private foundation.
It's kind of ironic that the founder of the Nobel Prizes, Alfred Nobel, was the inventor of dynamite and explosive devices associated with them. And I wonder, you know, since he died in 1896, what do you think has helped to reconcile the sort of irony of him being behind prizes for achievements, especially the Peace Prize, of course, and yet, you know, his history is one that. Well,
he was working as an engineer, researcher, and inventor on the task to master nitroglycerin. He was fascinated with this task. Many people were working on it. He succeeded and invented not only the substance but also the name dynamite, but also the blasting cap. It's the two-step ignition process which revolutionized the explosive business. In his lifetime, dynamite was almost exclusively used for peaceful purposes. Railway construction works, tunnels, canals, and the like. So it became an important part of the industrialization and urbanization of the world, actually. Well, then he had been active, actually, financing peace congresses. He had a philosophy. You can discuss whether it was a kind of advocacy, but he has an interesting correspondence with Bertha von Suttner, who clearly inspired him to involve himself in this pacifist activities, where he says that, well, my development or rather, one should develop military technology as fast as possible to the point where the aggressor would know that he would be annihilated in the next moment. And that will assure peace much better, faster than your peace congresses.
Almost like a nuclear standoff.
It's more or less what went under the acronym MAD, Mutually Assured Destruction, which we knew and know about.
Now, interestingly enough, the second challenge, the big challenge that the Nobel Foundation faced was the issue of finances. And I know the chairman of the foundation, Professor Bengt Samuelsson, who's the Nobel laureate and Swedish biochemist, he was quoted as saying that the real value of the awards, which are currently around $1 million US, plummeted in the Nobel Foundation's first 50 years. And take me through what happened, the whole issue of safe securities.
It's a question of interpreting the will again. Alfred Nobel wrote that he wanted all his assets, and he had a worldwide group of companies, 94 production sites in 20 countries without fax, telephone, or let alone internet. And he wanted all that to be sold off and put into a fund and invested in safe securities. Now, what is safe securities? At his time, it was quite rational to interpret it, which was the task of not only the executives of the will, but there was a committee arriving at a compromise with all parties. They interpreted safe securities as gilt-edged bonds, which was a perfectly rational proposition before the First World War. But then you have waves of inflation eroding the real value of the underlying assets. And on top of that, we had a tax imposed on us, whereas other foundations who only dealt with science were tax exempt. But we have these strange disciplines, literature, and in Sweden, a peace prize. In Norway was at that time considered not quite clear what it was about. Anyway, it took almost 50 years for us to get tax exempt status. We were the biggest taxpayer in Stockholm. And also a liberalization of the statutes and the guidelines for our investments, so we could invest in stocks. And we recovered, and by the 90th Jubilee we had more than recovered, and we are now clearly above the real value of the initial sum. Of course, had we been in stocks, we would be, I don't know, 10, 20, 40 years bigger, but well, here we are, and $1 million US is, well, nobody has complained.
I'm sure, yeah.
And of course, the important thing here is the work of the awarding Nobel committees in each discipline. Right. The international character of this whole process, this machinery, that is what I call the part of the iceberg you can't see. That's the important. The medal, the money, the ceremony, well, that's quite easy to do. But the serious work is the work of the committees with the help of expertise from all around the world, both at the level of nominations, but also importantly at the level of evaluation. Yeah. So that's the trick, actually.
It's rumored that Alfred Nobel said that the reason he trusted Scandinavians to handle this, the prizes and the money and everything, is because they tend to be the least corrupt.
Well, he was questioned for good reasons by the few people he discussed his plans with, and said, why in Sweden, Norway, peripheral, small, poor countries? Well, his answer was that exactly up there in the north, people tend to be least corrupt. And well, if you look at those transparency indices, it seems that we're living up to his characterization.
I was interested to note your comments about Mahatma Gandhi, and that's a debate that comes up from time to time. He was nominated, I think, 5 times for a Nobel Prize, but never actually awarded one. And I think looking back, your comment was that it was a shame, but you had your reasons.
Well, there are a number of concomitant reasons why the Norwegian Nobel Committee at that time, well, they were preparing a decision, and then they were too late. Well, it's clearly the great missing one on the list. There are great missing names on the literary list too. The committee at the beginning of the last century succeeded in missing out on Strindberg, the greatest Swedish author, on Ibsen, and on Tolstoy above all. And today we are quite sure that Tolstoy was the kind of writer Nobel had in mind when he was talking about literature in an ideal direction.
How do you cope with some of the politics that come up? I mean, sometimes a little unexpectedly, but for example, you know, the potential of revoking the Nobel Prize. There was demands that the Portuguese surgeon Igas Moniz, who pioneered the lobotomy, for example, surgery, he should have it taken away because of the negative effects back in the 1930s and so on. Or Günter Grass, who admitted a Nazi past as a writer. How do you deal with those sort of political...
Well, it's very clear from our statutes. There is no possibility. The decision is final. No. And when it comes to Moniz, yes, but if you look into how mentally ill people were treated before lobotomy, at that stage of medical science, that was seen as a radical improvement. Now we know it wasn't, or it was dangerous, etc. And it's absolutely out of practice. But you have to measure things in a historical way with the knowledge which the mankind had at that time. Right. And then the laureates are awarded the prizes for what they have done in their respective area. And the Nobel Foundation certainly has no intention to comment or have points of view on
stay out of the politics,
on what they do in other areas or what views they express, etc.
What are the next steps now as you take the Nobel Foundation forward? I know you have exhibitions that have been traveling around the world, one that's ended up in the Middle East, here through Abu Dhabi. It's going to finish in Dubai and carry on. The next round will start out in Dubai as well.
Yes, a new... Well, there are many reasons why the Nobel phenomenon is interesting, but an important one is that this is a symbol for intellectual endeavor, for achievements, symbolizes the importance of education, of studies, of research, and there are other activities. I'm not thinking about all the violence in the world, but who get a lot of attention, and here is something which is of a different kind, and as we see it, of course, purely positive, and also conveying the values of enlightenment.
And presumably a place like Abu Dhabi, which is pushing for sort of academic excellence, it's a natural partner for the Nobel Foundation.
Well, we were invited, and so we thought it would have been a pity not having been in an Arab country. We've been in a Muslim country in Malaysia before, but not in an Arab. And in a time where some people are digging trenches and tearing down bridges, we think this is a good step.
Michael Sohlman, thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you very much. Great pleasure.
Thanks. Well, that was Michael Sohlman, the Executive Director of the Nobel Foundation, talking to us about the unique history of the coveted Nobel Prizes. Thanks for being with us. On tomorrow's show, we talk with Dutch-Egyptian actor Omar Metwali about his powerful performance in the new film Rendition, a new political thriller that's just hit the theaters, looking at the alleged American intelligence secret service rendition flights to transport people considered a security threat to prisons offshore. If you have any topics you think we should be discussing on the show, send your emails to riz@aljazeera.net, and don't forget to check out our question of the week on YouTube. We'll see you next time. Street Talk is next.